How to make the comment section angry 101 is of course doing a tier list on the strongest Joestars from weakest to strongest. Hello, my name is Metas, and if you know the history of my channel, I've already done the antagonists weakest from strongest, so I thought it was high time to do protagonists from weakest to strongest. And unlike my antagonist video, this tier list will be a bit more fun as I do have a couple variations of the list and a lot of variations of some of your favorite Joestars in this list as well, just to cover all my bases on if somebody has a lot of questions of why this specific version of a Joestar wasn't on the list. And since I have a lot to talk about, let's just jump right into it. Starting off in my weird D tier, but not kind of D tier list because they don't have any scaling, would be of course Joe Dio. So this is kind of pretty self-obvious. At the time of this recording, Joe Dio and Part 9 JoJo Lands only has 9 chapters. And if I were to basically spell it out for you, Joe Dio has like almost no scaling and we barely know anything about his stand November Rain. It has shown the power to flatten people with its raindrops. That's the best way I would describe it, and that's literally about it. Nothing else has been shown or talked about, or Joe Dio has shown any like crazy stats or crazy feats or anything. There's just really honestly nothing here for him. And I know some people are going to bring up the fact that he was able to subdue Rohan. Okay, here's the thing, and I'm going to clarify this now. Just because Steel Ball Run Universe Rohan has the same abilities and looks as the original universe's Rohan doesn't mean they have the same stats. That is just an association fallacy that happens pretty often in JoJo's. Even I do it sometimes, but in this video I'm trying to keep it pretty concrete with the Steel Ball Run Universe characters. Even though there's some like lore implications that it might be the same Rohan, it's honestly really weird, and this isn't the place to talk about it. I might talk about it in a different video, but yeah, basically Joe Dio is at the bottom of the list because we literally know nothing about him in terms of scaling, which I think personally is pretty fair. Moving on to C tier, we have the bottom of C tier with, unshockingly enough, Jonathan Joestar. Now, I think everybody and their mom is going to be coming to this conclusion. It is a Part 1 character, and if anybody knows anything about Part 1 scaling, it is pretty lackluster. I'm not saying Jonathan is weak by any means. He is pretty strong, but compared to his other relatives, yeah, it's not really fair. In terms of scaling, it's actually really easy to do this. He basically scales to Dio, if not a little bit stronger than him. It's shown with other vampires within Part 1, they get ridiculously powerful around small building level, depending on how you calc some of the scans on screen. Dio is a prodigy and is supposed to be way stronger than those vampires on screen, and is stated to be even stronger than Jonathan and Zeppeli at one time when not at full power. Jonathan then absorbs Zeppeli's hormone, gets even stronger than that version of Dio, and is able to match a full power version of Dio toe to toe. So you're looking at an AP or a character that is probably within small building level plus to building level in terms of AP. And of course his durability should be somewhere at that level 2 as he was able to trade blows with Dio, and possibly could be higher as the Steamboat Explosion has been calculated to be either in building level to large building level in terms of destructive capability. Quick side note on that one, most likely Dio was in control of Jonathan's body at the time, so take that scaling with a grain of salt. And of course we can't forget about Hormone. In Jonathan's case, with how he uses his Hormone, it's more or less used for only combat and doesn't use any of the exotic techniques we see later in Part 2. He still can transfer his Hormone through metal and manipulate other people's bodies with it though, so it is still pretty lethal. And if anybody is wondering if it's fair to compare vampire powers and Hormone powers, that being Jonathan to Dio, yes, it is completely fair to compare these two characters, as all the vampire powers we see within Part 1 are basically shown that Hamon can do a variation of that, and even Zeppeli states that Hamon and vampire powers are two sides of the same coin. And the major factor why he's at the bottom of C tier is because, well, he doesn't have any speed scaling. If he actually did have some speed scaling, he would be placed higher, but Part 1 has no speed scaling as it's literally non-existent. Poor Jonathan. So moving on to the top of C tier, we have the first variation of a Joestar on this list, which is Old Joseph. Now the reason why I'm putting him here is because we kind of need him for young Joseph when we get to him. So that's the primary reason why I placed him in the tier list to begin with. So Old Joseph in terms of scaling is a pretty massive downgrade compared to his Part 2 counterpart. Young Joseph fought Straitso, and Straitso directly compares him and Dio 1 for 1 and says that he is better than Dio as he takes his fights actually seriously. The Pillarmen are vastly stronger than Straitso by large margins, as there is a rudimentary power scaling system within the food chain within part 2, straight up stating that the Pillarmen are stronger than vampires. That young Joseph was able to beat all 3 of the Pillarmen and outscale them. Those Pillarmen, at bare minimum in terms of AP, thanks to Wamu and his Divine Sandstorm, can be calced from building level to large building level plus, at bare minimum be light speed, thanks to cars, and in terms of durability should be roughly around their AP level. And not to mention the fact that AC/DC is just casually eating dynamite. That's a thing to add to their durability too. So where old Joseph is scaled in here, he is just a low bold version of young Joseph. So his AP should be somewhere in that small building to building level in terms of AP. In the case of speed, he was able to outspeed Star Platinum, which is a stand that has been calced to massively faster than Light Plus. And in terms of durability, it should be roughly around the same area as his AP. You have to critically remember here, old Joseph is an out of prime, not training with his Hamon type of character. The only thing going for him is his combat experience and his Hermit Purple, which is kind of okay. It gives him a bit of a longer range, able to conduct his Hamon through it, which is not very good by the way, and is able to gather information, which is kind of useful for battle. And the big one being here is his speed. All that being said, he definitely outscales Jonathan. However, in comparison to his older self and other Joestars, yeah, he's not very good. Overall, looking at C tier, I think I've done a pretty fairly good job ranking these characters. I really wouldn't change it, as I think it's pretty self-obvious due to the massive speed difference. Joseph would fucking destroy Jonathan. Now, moving on to B tier. In last place in B tier would be Jolene Kujo. Now, this one is a pretty hard one to place. While she does have very few feats, those few feats and statements are extremely good. However, she is lacking the hacks to compete with the Joestars above her. On top of the fact that the Joestars above her are always being compared to being the strongest or having insanely OP abilities. In terms of scaling, this is how it goes. Thanks to the meteor feat in part 6 and Jolene being able to stop those meteors and break them, her AP should be somewhere in large building level plus to large town level in terms of AP, depending on the scan and calc you use for that meteor feat. However, when it comes to her durability, it is most likely not the same. The reason why, in the meteor feat, she does damage herself hitting those meteors, meaning that her AP and durability are not on the same level. So I would guess here on the low ball, it would probably be like in building level. On top of that, Whitesnake and a plethora of other stand users who are not at that level do damage her. So I think it's a pretty fair argument to say she's around that level. It can be debated more where her durability does lie. However, when it comes to her speed scaling, holy shit, there is a massive difference. She goes up against Whitesnake, a stand who was able to outspeed Jotaro when sneaking up on him. And you have to remember, part 6 Jotaro still has massively faster than Light plus speeds, even though he's not in his prime. Arguably, at the lowest you could go is probably like massively faster than Light. On top of that, she was able to tag a person with infinite to immeasurable speeds. So I can genuinely come to the conclusion that Jolene, in terms of speed scaling, is somewhere in between like FTL, FTL plus, or massively faster than Light. Now, when it comes to Stone Free and its string abilities, they're okay. They're not anything too crazy. While it's slightly impressive, so impressive that even Jotaro goes like, oh damn, my daughter's pretty strong, they don't have any crazy hacks that come with them. And while yes, Jolene can use them extremely creatively, they don't really do like a lot. While they do like slice off people's like limbs in some cases and ears, compared to her Joestar brethren above her, it's really not too impressive. Honestly, if she did have like a better stand ability or like have a lot more hacks, I'd honestly place her higher, but sadly no. But overall with her, due to her high AP, her really good speed scaling, and her overall intelligence and use of Stone Free, I definitely do think she's better than everybody in C tier. Now, moving on to the middle of B, we have Josuke Higashikata. Welcome to the weird scaling zone. So the thing with Josuke here is that he's always compared to Jotaro, but always a step or two down. Even Jotaro says it for a fact. However, in some data book guides, it straight up states that Josuke is at Jotaro's level, if not higher. Now, in these data books, it doesn't separate enraged Josuke from regular Josuke. On top of that, a lot of data book guide statements and statements from the manga say that Red Hot Chili Peppers, in terms of power, is at Jotaro's level during part 4, if not higher. And Josuke does beat the shit out of Red Hot Chili Peppers, but then Josuke is also the guy to state that Jotaro is still much stronger than him. So I'm hoping you're starting to see how like confusing and like weird the scaling gets. In terms of speed, I would say that Josuke compares to Jotaro during part 4, so he would be at that massively faster than Light plus level, if not just at massively faster than Light. Now, when we get into durability and AP, this is where it gets weird. Due to all the conflicting statements and stuff, I don't think a base Josuke Josuke is at a part 4 Jotaro's AP or durability level. I would say here, depending on the version of the Sun Calc, I'd put like Josuke at like a large town level character to a city level character. I would also then place Josuke's durability somewhere in that area too, as he's able to fucking kind of mop the floor with Kira, and Kira was able to give part 4 Jotaro a run for his money for a little bit, so that's my reasoning there. Now, if we take the enraged Josuke thing as his like maximum or his peak, I'd actually go a little bit crazy here and put him in low A. The only major difference here now is the hacks here / their stand abilities. I will always say time stop is better than a lot of stand abilities, and in this case it is true. Don't get me wrong, restoration is really good. It can make up defense or fuse people at an atomic level into objects or buildings or whatever you want to say Josuke fuses somebody with, so it's good. However, time stop is just better, and I think it's pretty obvious why he ranks above Jolene. He definitely has a way better stand ability, and being compared to Jotaro all the time in some guidebooks backing up the statements that he's stronger than him reinforce the fact that he's just better than Jolene. Now, moving on to the top of B tier, we have young Joseph Joestar. This one is probably going to be the most controversial out of the entire list, I think, until we get to the top of S, but that's besides the point. The reason why young Joseph is so far up the list is because of the scaling and implication off of part 3 Joseph. You see, part 3 Joseph is no longer in his prime and does not keep up with his Hamon training, as he has gotten a little bit slothful with it. With this narrative implication, this means that young Joseph scales to part 3 Joseph and much higher. Therefore meaning, in terms of stats, young Joseph has massively faster than light plus speeds, at minimum comparatively has the same AP and durability to that of the Pillarmen, especially Wamu and Kars, who have on multiple occasions been able to damage each other and vastly outrank vampires, as they should outscale even Dio because of the food chain within part 2. So putting Joseph in the building level to large building level plus in terms of durability and AP is not too crazy to say. I would actually even say that Joseph's durability is even higher, as he was able to take ultimate lifeform Kars' Hamon to the body and just sit there, as his insides were literally melting. And the fact that he was able to move and stuff while that was occurring and eventually defeat ultimate Kars is saying a lot. Now, what makes up for the very lackluster AP compared to the other people in B is his intelligence. Joseph is a tactical genius with, I would say, almost no rival compared to the other Joestars. As you have to remember, Joseph took on beings, I would actually say, that have lived for hundreds of thousands of years and have a plethora of combat experience underneath their belt. And Joseph, with his intelligence alone, was able to beat them. On top of the fact that Joseph's Hamon is non-comparable to the part 3 variant of him and Jonathan, as Pillarmen are susceptible to Hamon, but your Hamon has to be at such a caliber above everybody else's to even harm a Pillarmen. I would argue to say that Joseph had a much better control over his Hamon that only a person like Caesar and Ultimate Kars could best him at with it. And due to Joseph's intelligence pairing with how versatile and how really good Hamon is at affecting other people's bodies and life forms and materials and such, it makes Joseph a massive threat even if he doesn't have the AP to really back himself up, as his intelligence is really making him that guy. Don't get me wrong, Josuke and Jolene are very intelligent and know how to use their intelligence with their stand abilities very creatively, but when you're comparing it to Joseph, who was beating guys with hundreds of thousands of years of life experience and combat experience, it really isn't a fair comparison. The only category he's losing in is AP and maybe stand abilities, but his Hamon was pretty lethal. Now, you can do some mixing and matching with the B tier. Honestly, if you don't think Joseph is that guy for some reason, which I find very odd of you and pretty disingenuous, you can place him at the bottom of the B if you think the AP thing is too much. I would place Josuke above Jolene just because, of course, Josuke is always compared to Jotaro, which Jolene, shockingly, even though she is his daughter, doesn't have a lot of like comparables to each other. While Jotaro can be impressed by her, he never directly states that she is on his level. So, moving on to A tier. Fair warning, this is probably going to get really complicated really fast. So without any other character variations, at the bottom of A tier, we have Johnny Joestar. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be questioning this choice and why is he here? He should be higher. Let me explain. It's mainly due to the fact that Steel Ball Run has very questionable scaling, and that even goes for the entire Steel Ball Run universe. For the most part, in Steel Ball Run, there is barely to no speed feats at all, and the only thing thing we really get in terms of attack potency and durability is characters like destroying large boulders that can be calced like at small building level to like building level plus. And that's quite literally it for most of the crazy scaling in Steel Ball Run for the most part. However, it's not until D4C Love Train and Diego with his version of the world where scaling gets ramped up dramatically, where some characters like Johnny Joestar can be calced to be massively faster than light to massively faster than light plus in terms of speed, and in terms of AP, it eventually gets to infinity thanks to TUS Act 4. However, there is a newer idea that is being presented within the community where, well, sure, Diego has the world, but it's not Dio here, and it's not stated in any guidebook or anything that these guys are the same exact stands, leading to the convincing idea that, well, Johnny Joestar is just a person that can shoot a really powerful bullet timer blast. And to be honest, with all the previous stuff that happens within Steel Ball Run and nothing really extraordinary happening, yeah, it's kind of convincing, to be honest, and in line with the Steel Ball Run universe's scaling. Johnny is just an above average human with an incredibly powerful one-shot ability. Basically, he is one giant glass cannon. However, the reason why he's an A tier and beats everybody below him is because of his hacks. I'm of the philosophy that if your hacks are crazy good, stats don't really matter, and in this case, it's definitely true. Like I said previously, Act 4 has the ability to one-shot its opponent as they will be hit with infinite damage and they will die. And to add insult to injury, this ability does indeed track you. However, it kind of ignores its user, so if TUS Act 4's bullet and infinite rotation were to crossfire with Johnny once more, he can be hit with it and he can die. However, that does require some prep time knowledge, as in most cases, if you don't know what you're heading into, that bullet is about to hit you really, really hard. Furthermore, Johnny does have TUS Act 3, and in this state, Johnny can hide in holes that he shoots, and if anybody were to come in contact with these holes and put their, I don't know, hand or something in them, they'll be instantly destroyed, as these holes are infinite and will destroy your body infinitely, as long as you place something in there. On top of that, Johnny is able to be inside these holes and not be damaged, and can travel with these holes anywhere on the battlefield, meaning that he can basically snipe you from any angle if he were to choose so. It's kind of semi-implied that TUS Act 4 could also be in these holes during the world fight with Diego. And just to keep on adding to this repertoire of hacks, TUS Act 4 can move during stop time for a very brief amount of moments in it, leading to the idea for some people that it possibly could have FTL feats, as there is no time during stop time. However, to be unfair to JoDio and to completely throw away the association fallacy argument, if we were to compare the world from part 7 to the world in part 3, the only significant change here would be, of course, that his durability would skyrocket to Jotaro and Dio's level being somewhere in large city level plus to island level in terms of durability, and his speed definitely being in massively faster than light plus to at the lowest you could go massively FTL. Coming back to the old idea that GR and TUS Act 4 are right next to each other in terms of the power scaling chart. However, with the new ideas being presented and a more critical look at Steel Ball Run, I'm not saying that Johnny Joestar is on fraud status, but he's not where he used to be. And since we are doing variations of these characters, a part 8 Johnny Joestar would scale above a part 7 Johnny, as he has much more experience with TUS Act 4 and his stand overall. So not much of a difference there. So moving on to the middle of A tier, we have Dio Kujo, which is kind of a shock to, I guess, older power scalers of the JoJo community, as he was always considered like the third strongest in terms of the classic 3 that we always knew, but now I've kind of moved them up a little bit here. So in terms of Jotaro scaling, it is pretty easy to discuss, as I do it pretty damn often, and I've even really kind of discussed little bits of it here in this video. The Sun Calc from part 3 ranges from anywhere from large city level plus to island level. Silver Chariot was able to block these rays, which are at this level, and has stated multiple times from Polnareff himself that Jotaro is stronger than him, so he should get to these levels if not higher. To reassure this fact, Dio has the same speed and AP, 2-star Platinum and Jotaro was able to tank these blows and these punches from Dio, kind of more or less confirming this feat and the fact that Jotaro is now at this level. You can also argue the fact that when Jotaro fought an awakened Dio who is even stronger than a space state, Jotaro's durability should be even higher. And on top of a rage boost he gained at the end of that fight, so should his AP, putting him in like a mountain level to island level AP range. And in terms of speed, he is definitely massively faster than Light Plus, as there's many calcs from Silver Chariot, which Jotaro scales off from, and then are reinforced with Dio. And there are a few stand stat guide statements and stand stats from the parts themselves stating that Jotaro is faster than Light, much faster than Light in some cases. And the cherry on top of all of that is that Jotaro can stop time for 5 whole seconds. I think it's pretty self-obvious why Jotaro belongs up here. His AP is insane, his durability is even crazier, his speed is up there with the fastest characters within JoJo, and he has a really good hack ability with time stop. Honestly, I expected nothing less from this guy. And of course, with his part 6 and part 4 variations, well, with part 6, I'd place him at the very end of A, and I would actually move Enraged Josuke down to the top of B, and then have at the very top of B part 4 Jotaro, as part 4 Jotaro still has all the same stats as part 3 Jotaro. The only significant difference here is he only has time stop for 2 seconds, and the reason why part 6 Jotaro is up there is, well, he has time stop for 5 seconds again. However, it is semi-implied that he doesn't have his full strength like his part 3 variant. Coming to no surprise if you know my channel, at the very top of A is Giorno Giovanna and Gold Experience Requiem. Now, there are 2 ways you can scale Giorno. Either he's the ultimate stand user with the ultimate stand, or he's on fraud watch. There's no in between with him. Going with the ultimate stand scaling first, using thematics from the story itself and a lot of data book quotes and entries, one can determine that Giorno Giovanna's Gold Experience Requiem is a stand that has comparable AP and durability to Star Platinum the World, and has infinite to immeasurable speed, as he should outscale Made in Heaven, as in a lot of data book guides he is right next to Made in Heaven, but is always referred as the ultimate stand in those books, while some of the strongest villain stands and hero stands are right next to them, and never received the title as the ultimate stand. The only other person that receives the ultimate stand title is Star Platinum the World, which leads me into this segue: inconsistency and fraud watch scaling. The problem with GER some of the time is that data book statements only give you so much, and a lot of the time people want actual statements and feats from the actual manga itself. And if we look at it like that, technically Gold Experience Requiem only scales above Silver Chariot, funny enough, as King Crimson beat Silver Chariot, so therefore Gold Experience Requiem should be above Silver Chariot. Where the problem comes now is that Dio Kujo scales way above Silver Chariot. This is a pretty obvious fact I just said a little bit ago. And with 2 stands having the ultimate stand status, it really asks a lot of questions of who's the ultimate stand, because there can't be 2 ultimate stands. That makes no fucking sense. So it honestly leads to a lot of the data book guide statements being very fishy. Not a lot of them are coherent or make sense, at least when talking about Gold Experience Requiem. So in terms of stats, it's kind of up in the air. Either you look at Giorno as the ultimate stand, narratively speaking here, and using all the guidebook statements to back that up, or 2, he's on fraud watch. However, Giorno does have a lot of the hacks that benefit him a tremendous amount. The biggest one being here is Return to Zero. Any actions to harm Giorno will be reverted back to 0, allowing GER and Giorno to attack first or whatever they want to do. It's pretty overpowered. On top of the fact it is passive, so it's on all the time. The next would be Gold Experience's abilities of life creation. It's pretty self-obvious. Giorno is able to create small animals through his stand. On top of that, thanks to that ability, he can actually self-heal with his life creation, and potentially has a one-shot ability through life exhaustion, as he puts a whole bunch of life energy into a living being, making them cycle through their entire lifespan within mere moments. No matter how you look at it, Giorno and Gold Experience, ultimate stand user or not, is still extremely powerful. The lowest you could probably rank him, depending on who's on this list, if we put all the variations of all these characters, is like tied with Enraged Josuke in B, or in like the lower parts of the A tier. However, I'm a man who likes to take in the whole knowledge of the entire story to power scale, and the narrative implication with GER is that he is the ultimate stand. The idea of the Requiem arrow powering up the stand is that to rival God. It's kind of supposed to be this massive elevation of power to rival something even greater, and because of that, I think it validates the fact that Giorno should be somewhere in A tier, and at least in my opinion, the top of A tier. But you can take it with a grain of salt and put him on fraud watch. Of course, with A tier, you can do some mixing and matching, but in my opinion, the Giorno, Jotaro, Johnny placing is pretty spot on, at least in my book. So coming in S tier at the very top, all by himself, to no surprise if you know my channel's history, is Josuke Higashikata, aka Gappy from Part H to Jolene, with his soft and wet Go Beyond. Oh god, what have I not said about Gappy in the past? Of course, he is a Steel Ball Run character, so his scaling gets pretty weird, I would say. At the highest echelons of soft and wet Gobian's powers, they are at least relative to Wonder Reviews. Now, Wonder Review scaling gets even dumber, as Wonder Review scales to all JoJo villains and surpasses them. Now, that comes from the volume 27 statement from Araki himself. So that means you're combining the stats of part 3 Dio, which I discussed earlier, and smashing them with Made in Heaven and its speed feats to make this villain at this level. A monster that can be calced in terms of AP somewhere in island to mountain level, durability in that same range, and speed in infinite to immeasurable. Josuke and Soft and Wet Gobion, with a little bit of assistance, did beat that guy, so he should be at least around that level at the highest you can place it. There are other ways of looking at it too. His speed could be relativistic, as there are cases where characters are attacking him and in the same moment he then therefore attacks them. He's pretty damn fast. He was able to beat Vitamin C's user and literally strike him once, killing him in the head, and Vitamin C's user was able to withstand a building level explosion from Killer Queen. So his AP is around building level. And in terms of durability, he was able to withstand a lot of punishment from Wonder Review during that ending arc. So I would say it should be somewhere around that building level, maybe. That one can be argued a bit though. Moving on to his hacks and his stand abilities, this is where it gets pretty fucking crazy. Plunder is his original ability before Go Beyond. Plunder has the ability to take away the property of things. It can get so abstract that it can even take away friction from an object, and in other cases has made people blind or remove all of their water from their body, or most of the water from their body. Plunder in Part 8 is never given a limit to what it can take away, so you can get pretty abstract with it depending on how you're arguing with it. Next, of course, would be his strongest ability and the reason why I place him so high, Go Beyond. Go Beyond is a bubble that does not exist in the physical realm and is so powerful it's able to transcend space and destroy energy permanently, arguably even be able to erase concepts, on top of the fact that you cannot interact with it, nor can you defend yourself from it. It does not care about anything, it has no logic behind it, it is ridiculously busted. Now, Go Beyond's AP is still up for debate, but the fact that it's able to completely destroy energy itself, as matter cannot be created or destroyed and it somehow destroyed it, it has to be really, really powerful. And since it was able to destroy Wonder Review, an aspect or the full power of Calamity Energy itself, the highest you can go with its AP is like conceptual damage. On the low end, you can just compare it to Soft and Wet and its AP, so like building level plus. So on the higher end of Soft and Wet Go Beyond scaling with Josuke, it gets pretty crazy, as if you're comparing it to Wonder Review at its highest level, it is pretty nuts and definitely belongs in the #1 spot. It's pretty self-obvious why he's at the top. If he's really at that higher end of scaling, he basically outstats everybody on this list, on top of the fact that he has the ability to plunder critical aspects of a person's like being from. And let's not forget about Go Beyond. Nobody can defend from Go Beyond. It doesn't follow by any rules or logic, so a lot of these abilities aren't going to work on it. On the lower end, I would actually say he's around Johnny's level. He is pretty nuts. He does have a lot of good hacks and his stats are pretty decent to okay. And that's the list. So just to quickly go over it, in S tier we have Josuke by himself. In A tier we have Giorno, Jotaro, Johnny. In B tier we have Joseph, Josuke, Jolene. And in C tier we have Joseph and Jonathan. And in the I just got here tier would be Joe Dio. And on screen will be all the variations of the list, but the one I just said is kind of my definitive one, at least in my head. To be honest, I don't think I really said anything controversial except for the young Joseph placing. That's literally about it. I think this is a lukewarm tier list when it comes to power scaling all the Joestars together and formatting them from weakest to strongest. Well, that's going to be the end of the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. See you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen. Doses!